Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Umashankar. In the last session, we have seen how to create an invoice in Oracle Fusion manually, and also we tried to create an invoice using SOAP-UI through REST service. So in this session, we are going to build an integration where we can create an invoice in Oracle Fusion. So the requirement is to, whenever we receive any ad hoc request from the business, we need to create a invoice in Oracle Fusion. Let's get started. In order to start with this integration, first we need to validate the REST API. First we need to identify the REST API and we need to validate, right? So this is the SOAP UI tool. So I try to trigger the payload. Okay, let me test with the 04. So now we can see the latest invoice ID generated, right? So this REST service working as expected, all right? So by using this request and response payload, we can start developing the integration. As a part of this integration, first we need to create two connections. The first REST connection to configure request and response payload, and second REST connection to configure Oracle Fusion application. Okay, so after that we will create a app driven orchestration to accept the request and response payloads, and we can do the mapping and we can activate the integration. Okay, I just connect to the OIC application. Click on menu, click on integration. First we need to create connections, right? So one connection for configure your request and response payload, all right? So click on create. So let me select the REST. So batch 02 demo REST connection. Okay, REST connection. Okay, so here a role I'm going to take the trigger. Okay, we are going to just configure the request and response payload, so that I am taking a trigger connection. Okay, so click on create, just test and save. Okay, so one connection is ready. So one more connection for access to the Oracle Fusion application. Click on REST. So here I am going to give batch 02 Fusion connection demo. Okay, demo ERP connection. Okay, here I am going to select the trigger and invoke. Click on create. Okay, now we are going to fill the connection properties. Okay, so the mandatory properties are, you can give the connection type. Okay, it's a REST API based URL, and you can give your Fusion instance connection URL here, and you can give the username, password. Okay, let's fill all the details. So I have provided the details. I have provided username, password and instance URL. Let me test it. Okay, so the connection was tested successfully. Save. Okay, and come back. Okay, our two connections are ready. Okay, now click on the integration, click on create. We are going to select the app driven orchestration to build this integration. Click on here app driven orchestration, select. Okay, batch 02 demo invoice creation. Okay, so click on create, keep this version as it is, click on create. So now this console window in a vertical, so we need to make it as a horizontal. Okay. Now we are going to configure our REST connection. Okay. So REST is the starting point of this integration. So basically it's a invoke connection. Sorry, it is a trigger connection. All right. When you are submitting some request to OIC, we can use the trigger. All right. So click on here. Okay. Let me select our connection name. So batch 02 demo REST connection. Okay. Now we are going to give what do you want to call your endpoint. Just what we are going to create invoice. Okay. Click on next. Okay. What is the endpoint relative resource URI? Here you can give some meaningful URI name. Create invoice. Okay. So we are going to perform the operation in Oracle Fusion application. We are going to create an invoice so that you have to select the post. Now we are going to configure request and response payload. Okay. Click on next. And here we are going to select either you can select the XML schema or JSON schema. Let me click on the JSON sample. Click on here. Okay. Already I have a payload. This is my payload, request payload, which we have tested here. Okay. You can copy the same payload from the SOAP UI. Okay. Click on OK. Okay. So click on next. Now we are going to configure the response payload. All right. Click on in here. We can configure your response. So my response is I need to get the status and invoice ID. Okay. Let me configure that. So I'm going to configure status and invoice ID. Okay. So once the invoice is generated, we need to fetch the invoice ID and also we need to fetch the status. So in case of failure, we need to get the failure status, and success, we need to get the success status. Okay. Take this and configure here. Okay. Click on OK. Click on next. Click on done. Okay. Once you configure the REST connection, automatically you could see one mapper. So now I'm going to capture the invoice ID. All right. So the moment the invoice ID is generated, we need to capture the invoice ID, and also we need to capture the invoice status, whether success or failure. All right. So in order to track those values, so I'm going to take the assign activity here. Okay. So assign variables, click on create. Okay. Click on plus where underscore invoice create, you can give flag. Okay. So initially I'm going to give. Okay. So this flag will be conditionally, we can change it. Validate. Okay. Validate. Click on close. One more variable, we need to capture the invoice ID. Okay. Where underscore invoice ID. Okay. So here also I'm going to give blank value, validate and close. Close. Okay. So we have declared two variables, right? So now we are going to call our REST service, our Fusion ERP REST service. So whenever you are whenever you are exposing any REST based web services, we can call that service within a scope so that we can easily track the errors. In case of any errors related to the Fusion application, right, we can easily track that, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the scope activity. Okay. Scope call REST. Okay. Click on create. Okay. So within the scope activity, I'm going to call the REST service. Okay. So what I'm going to do, click on plus symbol. So we already created one more connection to access to the Fusion application. So here you can select the demo batch 02 demo our ERP connection. Batch 02 demo ERP connection. Okay. So call REST service. Okay, call, you can give any name, call REST API. Okay, here what is the endpoint related to resource UI? Your Fusion REST API. We can provide our Fusion REST API service. Okay, let me copy the Fusion REST API service. Okay, this is our service. Copy this and you can paste here. Okay, only you can give the API only. So while creating a connection, we already provided the instance details. Okay, you should not give with the instance details. Only we have to provide the REST service here. Okay, so let me select the post. Here also we are going to select the configure request payload and response payload. Okay, click on next. Here we are going to JSON sample. Click on inline. Again we are going to take your request payload. Click on OK. Click on next. Here again going to select the JSON sample. Click on inline. Here once you call the REST web services, we need to capture the invoice ID. Here we need to configure the complete your response. Okay. So let me take here, copy here. Okay. This is my response. Okay. Just click on OK. Click next. Click done. Okay. So we call the service, REST service. So now we have to perform the mapping. Okay. So in order to perform the mapping, click on the edit button. Click on your request wrapper and here request wrapper. Okay. So here you can see the invoice lines. Here also you can see the invoice lines. Okay. Let's start the mapping here. So invoice number to invoice number, invoice currency to invoice currency, invoice amount, invoice date, business unit, supplier site, and description. Okay. Now we are going to map to the line level. So header level mapping is completed. All right. So we are going to map to the header level. All right. So whenever you are mapping line level, so first we have to map to make sure that you have to map to the lines to invoice line. This is very mandatory. Okay. Then map with the line number to line number. And then you can give the line amount. Okay. And you have to give the distribution combination. Okay. Done. So our mapping is completed. You can validate and close. Save it. Now in case of invoice is generated, all right, we need to capture the invoice ID and also we need to change your variable. Initially you have created a variable, right? Here invoice create flag. So in case of the invoice is created, we will make this variable as a Y. In case of this invoice ID is not generated, we are make the invoice flag as no. Okay. Close this. So in order to maintain the status, so what I can do, again I'm going to take the assign activity. Okay. Assign variables. I'm going to give one. Click on create. Okay. So Here you can select your where underscore invoice flag. So in case of when the invoice is generated, we are making the flag as Y, validate, close. Now we need to capture the invoice ID from the response. Okay, click on invoice ID. Okay, the moment you call the web services, we will get the automatically response, right? From this response we got the invoice ID, right? So click on here. So now we are going to map your response. Okay, if you come down here, see execute response. Okay, so you can drag and drop this invoice ID. Okay, so mapping is done, validate and close. Okay, so initially the create invoice flag is null. The moment the invoice is generated, we are making the invoice flag to Y, and also we are capturing the invoice ID. Okay, in case of any errors, what we are going to do? Now we are going to go to the fault handler. Alright, here we have to handle the global level exceptions. Right, click on fault handler, default handler. Here we are going to update the status again. Alright, so again I am going to take the status here. Okay, assign variables, this is the 3. Okay, you can give any name. So in case of any errors, so what I am going to do, so your invoice create flag is, okay, make it as a blank. So whenever you get any errors, right, the controller will move to the exceptions, global fault or black. Okay, no, close. Okay, and also I am going to declare one more variable, invoice ID. Okay, so in case of the invoice ID is not generated, just I am going to give -1. Okay, validate and close. Okay, let me check once again. Okay, validate and close. Okay, again I'm going back to the main section. So whenever whenever we are going to get any errors, okay, so the controller will move to the fault handler. Okay, and it will change the status of the invoice creation flag, and also it will assign the invoice ID to -1. Okay, so now in case of our invoice create flag is Y, then only we will send our status to success. Right, in case of our invoice is not generated, that means the invoice flag is N, so we need to send the failure status. Okay, in order to validate that condition, so I'm going to take the switch activity. Okay, switch activity out of the scope. Okay, okay, first condition, if you see this condition for in case of invoice flag is invoice create flag is Y. All right, if I'm going to give the name invoice is generated. Okay, so let me check the your flag. Okay, in case of your invoice create flag is Y. Okay, validate. Okay, close. So what I'm going to do, in case of the invoice is generated, okay, this mapper I will bring here. Okay, let me reset. Okay, so in order to bring upside, just take the reposition, you can put here. Okay, it will come here. So if the invoice is generated, now we are going to do the mapping. Okay, let me save it. Now click on this mapping edit button. So now we are going to map the response, right? So already if in case of invoice is generated, the value is getting assigned to the where underscore invoice ID. This is the variable which we created. Just map it. Okay. So here we can mention the status. Click on the create target node. Okay. Click on here. You can give the success. Okay, this is done. Validate and close. So otherwise, in case of invoice is not generated, that means if the invoice create flag is n, here it will come, the condition will come to otherwise. Here also we need to take the mapping. In order to take the mapping, click on here. You have to take the mapping here. Okay. Okay, here we can do the mapping. So I'm going to map to the where underscore invoice to invoice ID. Okay, in case of the invoice is not generated, by default you will get the -1, right? Here I'm going to create the status failure or error, anything is fine. Okay, so error. Okay, validate and close. So our integration is completed. Okay, first initially we have configured a request and response payload. We have declared two variables, one variable to capture the invoice ID, other variable to track the invoice create flag, and then we call the REST APIs. In case of the invoice is generated, okay, so we are changing the create invoice flag to Y, and we are capturing the invoice ID. In case of if you get any errors, we will capture the errors in the exception in the global fault. Okay, so in case of the invoice is generated, we are doing the mapping with the success status. In case of the invoice is not generated, we are changing the invoice status to failure. Okay, so the process is completed. Let me activate the integration. Click on the tracking. Take the invoice number here. Save. Okay, save and close. Okay, so I'm going to activate this integration. Let me click on here. In case of if you want to include the payload, if you want to enable the tracing, you can use this option. But in production environment, creating a payload option, enabling the payload option is not suggestible. Okay. Basically, this enable tracing, it will generate the active stream logs, okay, to store the entire payload of each and every activity in our integration. Okay. So once you enable, you can enable the active stream logs. Okay, basically these logs are useful for the debugging purpose. Okay, let me activate it. Okay, let me refresh it. Okay, now let me run the integration test. Click on body. Okay, so let me take the payload once again. Okay, I'm going to give the 005. Okay, otherwise I can give 006. Okay, so once we trigger this payload, we can see from the front end whether this invoice is created or not. Okay, basically this invoice has $300 amount, and it contains the 3 lines. Okay, let me test it. See, a processing a message in a call REST API. Let's see what is the error. Okay, let me come down. We got some error. Let's see what is the error. Okay, we got an error. So whenever we receive any errors, so what we can do, we can enable some more logs. Okay, so let me deactivate this integration. Now we are going to troubleshoot the issue. Okay, click on edit button. So in the global fault handler, so we have to catch the one more variable. It's a error. What is the actual error? All right. So what I can do, let me create a one more variable to capture the actual error message thrown by the REST API. Okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to select the var underscore error. Okay. So I'm going to give, okay, I'm going to give single quote. So we are going to capture the runtime errors. Okay. So validate and close. Okay. So let me make it as big. Okay. So this is the main section. I'm just moving to the global fault handler. Here I'm going to capture the errors. Okay. Our new message v underscore error. Okay. So here we are going to capture as in the fault handler. Okay. So OIC by default it will generate the error code, reason and details. Right. Either you can take the reason or error code. So what I can do, I'm going to use the concatenate function. Okay. So I'm going to get both. Okay. Concat string 1. I'm going to select reason, and string 2 I'm going to select the details. Okay, both I'm going to select, validate and close. Okay, close. Okay, let me capture that. Okay, the moment it will come to the error section, it will, cursor will move to here. Okay. Okay, so here we are updating as a success error, right? So what I can do, so already we have a error. Let me remove this. Okay, so I'm going to use the concatenate function. See, so if you want to know the concat function, you can click on here. Okay, search here concat message, or concat also fine, you can directly write concat. Okay, concat of, so what I'm going to do, concat of error comma, so var underscore error. All right. Okay, let me validate this. Okay, done, validate and close. So now let me activate this integration once again. Let's see what was the exact error. Okay, so that we can understanding the how to troubleshoot in case of any errors. Activate this integration, activate it, integration activation in progress. Done. Let me run this once again. Okay, so let me run once again. Okay, let me, so again this time this got errored out. So some translation issues. cannot write the line number, the data does not conform to the NXDD schema. Okay, let me see the configuration once again. Okay, 1 minute. This is my payload, right? We have to make sure that sync in the both. Okay, so let me deactivate this. Once again, I am going to configure the request payload, make it sync. Okay, click on create invoice here. You configure the request. Let's see. Might be we configured wrong payloads. Okay, here again I have configured the done. Okay, update. And again here I'm going to update the request payload once again. Click on next. Okay, okay, click on next, click on next, done. Okay, again we have reconfigured the request payload. Okay, for the both connections. Save it. Okay, let me see the mapping once again. Okay, okay, mapping also come, it's good, seems to be good, no issues. Okay, yeah, here again I'm going to map the invoice lines. Okay, validate and close. Okay, tracking invoice number. I'm going to enable the tracking field once again. Save and close. Okay, so might be we copied wrong payloads. Let's see. Activate the integration. Click on here, test. Okay, let me test it. Now this time invoice is created. Okay, come down. So success, the invoice ID is generated. Right, so what I can do, I'm going to connect to the Fusion application. Let's see. Okay, so the issue is while configuring the request payload, might be for two connections we have select the different request payload. Okay, so when you are submitting the when you are configuring the request payload, make sure that you have to select the correct payload for the both connections. Okay, so the now invoice is generated. So now what I can do, so we can check from front end. Okay, so let me test once again. Okay, this time I'm going to give, okay, test. Okay, so the invoice is generated. Okay, let me log into the application, we can see. Okay, I just connected to the Fusion Payables module. Click on manage invoices, search with the invoice number. Okay, so invoice is created. Okay, with the 3 line numbers. Let's see, if you go to the lines level, you can see the 3 lines are created. Okay, so this is the way how we are going to develop an integration and debug the integration. Okay.